Well, we'll kick off then. So, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. On behalf of Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, I want to welcome the firefighters, fire chiefs, the municipal officials, the grant writers, and the community stakeholders who have taken the time to participate in tonight's briefing. Fire departments across New York's 24th district provide an essential service to our communities every day, whether it's responding to structure fires, motor vehicle accidents, hazardous materials. In those incidents, natural disasters or medical emergencies, you are often the first to answer the call when your neighbors need the help most. And Congresswoman Tenney has long been a strong advocate for ensuring that fire departments have access to the resources they need to protect their communities. And just as importantly, she believes the men and women who put themselves in harm's way deserve the confidence of knowing that when they respond to an emergency, the equipment, protective gear, communication systems, and the tools that they depend upon will be there when they need them. At the end of the day, every firefighter deserves the opportunity to return home safely to their family, and programs like AFG help departments acquire the equipment and training necessary to make that possible. As a quick overview, the Assistance to Firefighters Grants Program remains one of the most important federal funding opportunities available to departments to improve their capabilities through equipment purchases, training, protective gear vehicles, and communications equipment, and countless other operational needs, and we'll be diving into that tonight. For reference, since 2022 alone, FEMA has awarded more than $1.2 billion through the AFG program nationwide. And this helps departments strengthen the readiness and better protect both firefighters and the public. One point that Congresswoman Tenney and our team frequently emphasize, and I know many of you have probably heard this from me before, is that the AFG program is often viewed as a lottery. But in reality, it's much more of a science. Fire departments across upstate and Western New York have an outstanding opportunity to compete successfully for these federal dollars. And success is often a function of asking for the right type of funding, clearly demonstrating the need, aligning the request with FEMA's priorities, and putting together a strong application. And the departments that understand the program and present a compelling case for their request frequently place themselves in a much stronger position for consideration. And that's why tonight's briefing is so valuable. Hearing directly from FEMA about current priorities, application requirements, and best practices can make a meaningful difference as departments prepare for their submissions later this month. Congresswoman Tenney remains committed to helping local fire departments identify and pursue federal funding opportunities, and we are incredibly grateful to FEMA for providing this district-specific briefing for departments throughout New York's 24th. So tonight's presentation will provide an overview of the program. It'll discuss the application requirements and priorities and offer an opportunity to ask direction or questions directly to FEMA. It's now my pleasure to introduce a friend of the Congresswoman's of our office, Mr. Alvin Matthew. He is a FEMA Fire Program Specialist based out of New York City, who will lead tonight's briefing. And Alvin, you've seen this on a couple of my emails to you, but I'll say it here in front of other folks. Thank you for joining us and for your continued support of fire departments across New York and across the country. And with that in mind, Alvin, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gallo. Thank you so much for the great introduction. You definitely hit on every aspect of AFG and the great benefits of AFG. Mr. Gallo, thank you, and especially thank you to Representative Tenney for putting this webinar together. But most of all, I would like to give a big shout out to all the first responders joining us today. You truly are the quintessential backbone of the emergency response world, right? You are there before, during, and after a disaster, and you give up so much of your time with your family, your loved ones, your friends, to keep our community safe. So thank you for everything that you do. And again, Mr. Gao, I'm honored to be here today. This is such a great opportunity to be able to provide this, this webinar, provide this workshop to our first responders. I've been a first responder for 20 years, a volunteer firefighter here in Southern Westchester for 20 years, and I definitely know and I understand the hoops and hurdles that departments have to go through every day, and understand the consequences of not having the correct gear or the most up-to-date gear. So I definitely, this is just a pleasure for me to jump on today. So thank you again. Like Mr. Gallo said, is probably the best grant that FEMA does offer for its first responders. It doesn't just help the department, but it also strengthens and prepares the communities that you serve, right? And so that's important for us to make sure that we're strengthening the communities. So it definitely is a great program. So for those of us who've been with or those of us on the call today who've been with us before on previous webinars or workshops, or who've applied to AFG grants before, the seasoned veterans, the AFG pros, on this webinar workshop, you might recognize some of the slides that from previous webinars. So I do apologize. It feels a bit repetitive, but I really want to focus on the most important parts of the most important information for the FY25 application. So you'll have what you need to make the process easier. All right. And after the presentation, at some point today or tomorrow, I'll send out the slides, but also I'll send out a bunch of useful user guides and handy tips to help you with your application process. Right. So give me 1 second. Let me share my screen, and I'm going to turn off my video to save some bandwidth. Okay. Share. All right. Here we go. All right. So again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight on this call and this workshop. First off, um, I want you to know that there's always help available to you throughout the whole process. Okay. And as you can see on the screen, there's plenty of resources to choose from. You have the first option is myself. I'm the regional fire program specialist. And just to give you a little, idea about the 10 regions, there are at least one of us in each of the 10 FEMA regions. So in Region 2, which is New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, I cover New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. Another resource, a great resource, is the AFG Help Desk. It is staffed daily by fire service professionals who really know the program inside and out. And then finally, there is a link right there right at the last. There's a link for the AFG program website, where you could download these user guides that I'm going to send out anyways, but there's also other helpful user guides and links and a little bit of information that you could, squeeze out. It's all on that little program website, so it definitely is really useful. Okay. All right. If you haven't done so, please, please sign up on our monthly newsletter. It's going to provide you with a general periodic updates about AFG. It might give you some updates on the when the AFG starts and when it ends. It's going to give you updates on the status of AFG during the application cycle. So if you haven't done so, please sign up on this website. All right. So for FEMA Go, if you don't have a FEMA Go account, you will not be able to submit an AFG application. The application is only available to you through FEMA Go. Okay. So head over to go.fema.gov and create your account if you haven't already done so. That's where you'll submit everything. And just a heads up, AFG staff like myself can't unlock accounts, reset passwords, or create an account for you. If you have an issue with or a technical issue, please let me know. Shoot me an email, let me know, or contact the help desk, and we will get you to the right person to help you with that part. All right, very important, SAM.gov. Make sure you keep your SAM.gov account up to date. It expires every year. And if it's been a while since you logged in, log in and take a look at your account. I mean, you only have a few weeks left. So if you haven't done so, log in today if you can. If you've forgotten your password or username, call the sam.gov or, excuse me, email or log into that little link right there for fsd.gov or give them a call to help them to get it sorted out. I don't have access to SAM, so I cannot reset passwords or unlock accounts SAM is managed by GSA, which is a separate federal agency. But most importantly, don't let your SAM.gov account expire before you apply. If it does, renewing it can take anywhere between 3 to 5 weeks. Or it could take a lot longer than that. So we want you to get your grant funds to you, but we can't do that unless your SAM account is active. All right. So the 2025 AFG application, it's already open, and the period opened on May 19th at 8 a.m. and it's going to end on June 22nd at 5 p.m. All right. So if you haven't done so, please log into your FEMA Go account and start, applying. All right. So for today's agenda, this session is comprised of an overview of the AFG program and its components. All right. I'm going to give you a brief description on the award process and what you need to be doing now to prepare to apply. All right. And um, here's a game plan for today, essentially. I'll give you a quick rundown of AFG, talk about the awards, the award process, how it works. I'm going to walk you through building your application. And most importantly, I'm going to show you how to write a solid narrative. And I've got some tips and tricks to help you make it through the scoring rounds and boost your chances, especially when it comes to the narratives. If this is your first time applying to an AFG award, or you've never applied to an AFG or a FEMA grant or AFG grant in the past, or even haven't snagged an AFG award yet, it's important, or I think it's important, to understand how this whole process works. All right, I'm going to really hit hard on the importance of your narrative. You're going to get sick and tired of me saying NOFO, high priority, medium priority, low priority, but trust me, that's how much it matters. All right, so for how much funding is out there and how is it divided, this slide is going to lay out or lays out what you're competing for, um, what's essentially available and what's up for grabs. Okay, for 2025 application cycle, there's about $640 million available to you nationwide, split across all three fire grant programs that FEMA does offer. So for AFG, which is one of the three, is what we're talking about today. There's about there's about $291 in the pot that's up for grabs. For SAFER, which is the staffing for adequate fire and emergency response, this program helps departments with staffing and recruitment and retention. It has around $324 million available to you. And finally, the last fire grant program, which is the Fire Prevention and Safety Grant Program, this one supports fire prevention activities. So there's about 32 million or so $1 million up for grabs. All right, I'm going to go into more details and a few other, in the other slides and how all this money is distributed. All right, so it's important to know who is eligible for an AFG award. All right, not every agency or every department might not be available or might not be eligible for an award, but who can apply and who you will be competing against. So this slide is going to show you that, and this goes for SAFER and FP&S as well. For fire departments and fire districts, whether you're a full-time paid, if you're a volunteer, or you're a combination department, if you report to nearest, you are eligible to apply for an AFG grant. Okay. Oops. Okay. All right. For a non-affiliated EMS agency organization, you are eligible to apply for this award. And if you provide a medical transport like an ambulance corps or rescue squad, or you're an EMT or a paramedic and you are not affiliated with a hospital, a fire department, or a university, you could apply. If you are a public or nonprofit 501c3 or 501c4, you can apply. And the last one there, the state fire training academies, I'm assuming most of us are here on this call. It might not apply to you. However, every state fire training academy is eligible for an award, and it's a separate application. All right, so all that money I spoke about earlier, the $628 million, right? This diagram, this little blue lifesaver, is going to show you how that's broken down, how that's spread out, and who's essentially getting what. And it's really important for you to know that, career, combination, and volunteer fire departments all get an equal share of no less than 25% of all that money I mentioned earlier. All right. I emphasize no less because that number could potentially go up through something called open competition. Again, you have 25% that goes to career departments, 25% that goes to combination departments, and you have 25% that goes to volunteer departments right here on the screen. And that is 75% spread evenly between volunteer, combination, and career departments. Okay. And then we break it down a little further. All right. You have state fire training academies. Okay. State fire training academies, uh, they only compete with each other. They don't compete with other departments, or they don't compete with EMS departments or other fire departments. State fire training academies only get 3% of that money. And then you have FP&S. And FP&S makes up 10% of that award. And and then you have the non-affiliated EMS agencies will get no less than 2%. And lastly, I mentioned earlier about open competition. This essentially makes up the last 10% of that money. And this means that 10% will be spread out based on the best application, regardless of where they came from. And then we will add it on top of the 25% that's already there. So that 25% for the volunteer departments, career departments, or combination departments can potentially go up in percentage points based on open competition. Okay, really important. I want to talk to you about cost share. And just a heads up, if you get an AFG award, you are responsible for a local share, which means that you have to cover a certain percentage of the cost. Okay. It says it right here in the screen. There's like that 5%, 10%, 15%. That percentage depends on your population size. So, for example, if your population size is 20,000 or less, FEMA covers 95% of the bill, and you're on the hook for five of the remaining 5%. If you're between 20,000 and a million, your share goes up to 10%. Okay. And for the big cities like in New York City or Boston, uh, with over the million population, you're looking at around 15% out of pocket. All right. So, so here's a slide on population and funding restrictions. All right. So the population in the jurisdiction that you serve is going to determine the max amount of eligible program funding you can receive. And this table explains that. So if your population is 100,000 or less, that maximum allowable amount you can receive is $1 million. Okay. If your population is around 100,001 to 500,000 people, you can the maximum amount of award you can receive is no more than $2 million. All right, just a quick note about the criteria development panel. I'm going to talk a lot today about priorities. Okay, I'm going to talk about high priorities, medium priorities, low priorities. And it's very important for you to know that FEMA does not determine any priorities of a firefighter or EMT. It's the criteria development panel that determines those priorities. And in that panel is made up of these 9 major fire service organizations. Okay. These organizations are made up of first responders just like yourselves. They will determine what are the high, medium, and low priorities, and then they will submit that to FEMA, and then we will take those as recommendations. If you have any questions at all about the CDP, or if you would like to be part of the criteria development panel, I would highly encourage you to reach out to your affiliation or affiliate program on this list. All right. So just like any FEMA grant any FEMA grant, AFG has a life cycle. All right. It all starts with the notice of funding opportunity or the NOFO. Think of the NOFO as your playbook. Okay. It lays out what FEMA is looking for and what's most important for AFG or for the AFG awards. The NOFO tells you when you can start applying and when the window closes. I mentioned earlier for 2025, the application period opened at 8 a.m. on May 19th, and it's going to end at 5 p.m. on June 22nd. So please don't miss it. So once you create your application and then you submit it, right? It's the application period. Once you create it and then you submit your application, it goes through the electronic scoring stage. Okay. And in this stage, basically, a computer checks your answers and adds up points based on what you select. So it's an algorithm that the computer is basing it off of. Some questions are worth more than the others, uh, especially those tied to high priority items listed in the NOFO. And the more points you rack up, the better your chances of moving on to the peer review panel it is, okay? Which is the next stage. If your score isn't high enough at the electronic scoring stage, your application stops right there. It will not get to the admitted to the panel, or it will not even progress any further through technical review, and you will not get the award. All right, so here's the big takeaway. Focus on those high priority items in the NOFO. And I'll keep bringing them up because they're really, really important. And they're your best shot at scoring the highest amount of points. All right. So now there are some things that you can't control, right? I'll give you an example. Like, for example, you cannot control the age of your equipment or you cannot control your call volume. It is what it is. But however, those are weighted separately. All right. So for example, if you're trying to replace bunker gear or SCBAs that are only 7 or 8 years old, you will get a low score and you might not make it to peer review panels. So when you're deciding what to ask for, make sure it's stuff that's actually old or needs replacing. And the older the item is, the better chances of getting a better or high score. All right, so we go on to the next stage, which is the peer review panel stage. Your application goes to a room full of, fellow first responders. You know, these first responders, they'll read through everything you submitted and decide whether to recommend you to FEMA or not recommend you to FEMA. If they do recommend you to FEMA, your application heads over to technical review. All right. And in the technical review stage, um, is essentially where FEMA or AFG, the AFG crew, will double check your eligibility. We're not going to score you here. Right? We just want to make sure everything matches up. Like, let's say if you're, for example, if you're applying for an engine or a ladder truck, right? And you're saying that your engine or your ladder truck is 35 years old, we'll actually go in and check your engine, the VIN number, and we'll confirm with the DMV, I guess, to make sure that it's in fact 35 years old. Okay. And then once you clear technical review stage, and then the awards go out. In this stage, it could take anywhere between 12 weeks, 15 weeks, or sometimes a little bit longer than that. And then the whole process starts over again with a new NOFO for the next year. All right. Um, so this is the first stage of the process, right? The NOFO. I cannot stress how important it is to comb through the NOFO. Okay. Um, the NOFO document, you have to read the NOFO document and understand what is being asked of it, right? If you don't have the NOFO, and I'll send the NOFO as well alongside the user guides and the slide, but you could also click on the link over here to be able to download the NOFO. In your application, if you put anything with the red H, all right, that high priority item, you will get the highest amount of points for what you asked for. If you choose anything with this blue M, the medium priority, or the gray L, the low priority item, the application will not pass computer prescore. So please make sure stick with the high priority items. All right, I said it before. I just want to remind you again that FEMA Go is where the application is located and where it will be submitted. So please log into FEMA Go. All right, so this is just a screenshot of the login page. If you're unfamiliar with this screen, you need to hurry up and get cracking because you only got a few weeks left. And just to update from last year, and this is something new, you need to have a login.gov account in order to access FEMA Go. If you have already done so, if you already have an account, create an account with login.gov, that's great. If not, FEMA Go does require you to create an account online. Okay. Um, if you don't already have an account or login.gov account, visit the site by clicking this link right here where it says the signin.gov or sign in with login.gov. And at the login page, select create an account and follow the prompts to create your account. All right. And just a heads up, you want to make sure that the person creating the account is the eBiz point of contact in SAM. It's very important. Whoever created the account on SAM is the eBiz point of contact. They're the person that's going to be in charge of this account. All right, because when FEMA Go does it, well, what FEMA Go does is that it migrates all the information on SAM and it transfers it to FEMA Go. So whoever is that point of contact in SAM is going to be the main point of contact in FEMA Go. All right, so I'm not going to waste time and go through all the details about logging in through FEMA Go. I find it easier to just follow a step-by-step user guide, which I will send it to you after the presentation. All right. So after you log into FEMA Go, this is what the homepage is going to look like, right? It's going to give you all the awards that you've applied to in the past or the awards that you are currently working through right now on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side is where the applications for new awards will appear. So this screenshot is a little outdated, but the new FY25 AFG application will just say FEMA, excuse me, Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program 2025. All right. So what you need to do is just click on this little button right here that says Start Application, and that's it. That starts your process. All right. So we're done with the administrative part. All right. So now let's get to the fun stuff. What is the process of applying? You need to figure out what it is that you need. With any big project that you're working on, you need to prepare and have a plan. And that is what I'll talk to you about in the next few slides. How do we create a plan? All right, so we're here now. We create the application, and we're at the stage where we're going to plan and prepare. All right, you already have login.gov, you already have a FEMA Go account, you have your SAM.gov account updated. So we're at this stage now. So let's talk about how you're going to plan and prepare. And this section here doesn't only apply to AFG, but it works with safer applications as well, especially when you get to your narratives. You essentially want to make the application as attractive as possible, the most attractive as possible to the peer panel reviewer. And one of the most important parts of this phase is you want to figure out what it is you're going to ask for. And before you start your application, I want you to conduct a risk assessment. And this step will go a long way. As a matter of fact, I highly, highly recommend you mention you did a risk assessment in your narratives. You want to include that into your narratives. It is going to make your application more attractive. All right. In the end of the risk assessment, you want to develop a list of items that you need and prioritize those items. So just, take a walk around your department, take a look at your inventory, make a list of the oldest stuff that you got, right? Well, what is the oldest set of turnout gear? What is the oldest air packs that you have? Or what are the oldest thermal imaging cameras that you have that's about to fall apart, right? Stuff that's broken or inoperable, stuff that's eating away at your budget because you have to keep getting it fixed and repaired and fixed and repaired. What is it? What is it that's old? Okay. What are the highest risk items in my inventory that will get my firefighters to be the most effective and efficient during a response after receiving an AFG award? Okay. Then you open up the NOFO. and you compare your list of priorities to the priorities of the NOFO. What I mean by priorities, again, right here, you're going to see it on this slide, and you're going to see it in many other slides. It is the high priority items or the red H. You want to make sure your priorities align with the high priorities of in the NOFO, and it's easily be able to um, overlook it. Sometimes you're just really zoned in on what your priorities are that you kind of overlook the priorities of the NOFO. I'm going to show you the next screen. All right. Let's say you did the risk assessment and your department's priorities are getting more rescue rope, getting hose. You need a few lengths of hose, and you need a boat, right? And you put in for a rescue rope, you put in for a hose, and you put in for a boat. If you look in the NOFO, you will see that the rescue rope and hose is a high priority item, and the boat is a medium priority item. That one medium priority item is going to give you the lowest amount of points and is essentially going to drag your application down to the point it will get rejected at the computer pre-score stage, and it will not progress into the next stage. All right, and I get it. Many fire departments have waterways or flooding issues in their jurisdiction, and a boat is a super necessary item that you need to provide that best level of protection. But since that boat is not a high priority item in the NOFO, it is not going to get you to the highest point. All right. Again, the reason why I'm saying high priority, medium priority, low priority, within the last 6 or 7 months, I've seen many departments put in for low priority items and medium priority items, and they had fantastic narratives. But because these items were medium and low priority, it got rejected off the bat. So I really do not want it to happen to with anybody on this call. So please make sure, I just want to reiterate, you put anything on the application that has that blue M or gray L, I'm sorry. We'll see you next year. Okay. I cannot stress enough how important it is to check and double check the NOFO. If it's not the NOFO, then forget about it. All right. AFG is meant to give you the best, or excuse me, the most basic firefighting and EMS equipment. All right. This is really important. One of the items that you will be asked in the application is to determine your community classification. All right, whether you're urban, you're suburban, or you're rural, it's going to ask you that in the application. All right, the community classification can play a role in determining if some things are high, medium, or low priority for your agency or your department. But it also plays a role in determining the swim lane you will be competing during the electronic pre-score stage. And I will talk to you about this swim lane later on. All right. And you notice on the screen, there's four criterias that we use to determine the community classifications. All right. You got population, you got the amount of hydrants your jurisdiction has, or the land use, if how much land or how much of your jurisdiction is comprised of agricultural based zoning. Okay. And then finally, the number of stations per square mile within your primary first year response area. Okay. So lastly, um, if your jurisdiction has a mix of all these criteria and you're trying to figure out where you land, we do recommend using a population as a tiebreaker. All right. So for critical infrastructure, in the narrative, you will be asked about this as well. Okay. And what are some critical infrastructures? We're talking about hospitals, major industrial areas, schools, bridges, roadways. You need to ask yourself what critical infrastructure, if damaged or destroyed, would have a significant impact on my community. All right. You put in the critical infrastructure your department protects, it will make your application more attractive. Okay. We love to see that you're protecting large industrial sites, you're protecting power plants or sewer treatment facilities, that you're utilizing the funding to be able to protect these huge critical infrastructures. We want to see that. So please put that in there. All right, so for call volumes, you're also going to need to know your call volume. And this mainly goes out to fire departments. So for non-affiliated EMS agencies, um, I just want to let you know that we don't require it, but we do require it for fire departments. All right. Since we are in the calendar year of 2026, we will be looking for call volume numbers from 2025, 2024, and 2023. And just to note, we're only looking for the aggregated numbers for each of the call volume series. So for fire calls, for example, we are only looking for a total of those series 100 calls. All right, grant writers. I know a lot of us use grant writers, and that is absolutely fine. You're absolutely allowed to hire grant writers. As a matter of fact, if you are awarded, we will reimburse grant writer fees for up to $1,500. All right. And I want to let you know, if you hire a grant writer and you pay the grant writer, but you do not get awarded or get the award, we do not, or we will not reimburse you for the grant writer. We will only reimburse you only if you are awarded and you put it in the grant writer fees in the application. So you have to put it in the application and you have to get awarded in order to get the grant writer fees reimbursed for up to $1,500. And this is, or also this is important. You must pay your grant writer fees within 90 days. Okay. Within 90 days of the NOFO release and 30 days after the application period closes. Okay. Uh, Grant writer services must be competitively procured. We want to see that you followed your procurement policy and you provided open and fair competition. All right. And just to note, you got to submit a copy of the grant writer contract, a copy of the invoice, and a copy of the payment method to AFG once you put in for payment. Okay. We want to see the canceled checks, or we want to see the method in which you pay the grant writer. We want to see that. All right, so there are three different types of AFG applications you could submit, or we do recommend you do submit it. It's free. It doesn't hurt to apply for all three. You should submit all three applications. All right. You have your ops and safety application. You have your vehicle acquisition application, and then finally you have your regional application. Okay. I just want to let you know, if you're going to be applying for a micro grant, and I'll talk about this later on, if you're going to apply for a micro grant, then that application, that micro grant application becomes your ops and safety application. Okay, I'll talk about this later on. Non-affiliated EMS agencies, you're also allowed to submit all three applications. Again, state fire training academies, I don't think there are many people on this call or many departments on this call that's a state fire training academy. However, you can request many of the same things. However, you're going to have your own separate application. You're not going to be competing against other fire departments. All right. Also, in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about your ops and safety application. And in your ops and safety application, you can apply for many things, right? You could apply for equipment, you can apply for PPE, you can apply for your modifications to facilities, such as your source capture exhaust systems or your washer and dryers. And then finally, you could apply for wellness and fitness and training. Each one of these items moves separately during the scoring process, and you could ask for as many of these items as you want. However, there's a caveat, right? And it's up to you. If you have time to develop your application, you could do so. So you could put in as many things as you want, but if you have the time to do it, then do it. If you don't have the time to do it, then by all means do so. All right. The reason why I'm saying that is um, I want you to focus on the highest risk items in your inventory, because you're going to apply for all of these items in the same application. However, each item will require its own narrative. That's the hard part. I'd rather you not get bogged down on five different items, or five different items. I'd rather you, yeah, not focus on, five different equipment, or you want SCBA, turnout gear, um, harnesses, what not, right? Because you're going to have to create 10 different narratives for those, or five different narratives for those items. So just focus on the items that you really need the most. All right, so we're going to start with the equipment section of the ops and safety application. I talked about the swim lane earlier, all right? So when you're asking for equipment, there are three things that we will be looking at in your application, all right? We're going to look at your department type, the community classification, whether you're rural, suburban, and urban, and the item type of what you're asking for. You'll be scored against other departments like yours. There are three swim lanes, all right? And I talked about this earlier. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, and the best application in each group will get the highest amount of points that will reach to like 100 points, right? You'll see that on the screen, the 100 points you see on the screen. Everyone else gets points based on how close they are on top of or against your application. So let's say you're the leader of the category, they have to match at least 70% of that category in order to be considered. All right, so the closer you are to the leader, the more points you get. And these points include factors such as the priority of the item you are requesting. If it's a high priority item, you're going to get points for that. And what is the purpose of for the request? I'm going to talk about that later on. There are high priority purpose question answers that I'll talk about. What is the age of equipment being replaced? What is the call volume? And if your members are trained on the items you're requesting, those are all weighted and those will all get you points. All right. I talked about it earlier, how sometimes looking at the NOFO can get confusing. All right, so I took a screenshot of the NOFO. All right, so you notice the blue M and red H under fire and regional, right? You notice these right here, right? Okay. Um, you choose um, you choose anything with the blue M, your application will get the lowest amount of points. And you choose anything with the red H, your application with the highest amount of points, right? What gets confusing, for example, right? If you're choosing a if your priority is to get an air compressor and fill station and you are applying as an individual department, you'll notice how that air compressor and fill station is a medium priority item. Okay. And if you apply for it, there's a strong chance you'll get rejected. However, if you apply as a regional fire as a regional application, it will give you the highest amount of points because it's a red H. So just want to give you a heads up that looking at the NOVO can get confusing. So please read it thoroughly. Okay. All right. Um, so when you're reading the NOFO, keep in mind that not everything is available for an individual department, right? And I mentioned that earlier. Um, so again, please make sure you focus on the high priority items. All right, so I just want to dive a little bit deeper with the equipment. So you see on the screen where it says basic equipment, okay? High priority is given to basic equipment, which is simply the equipment that you carry on your fire truck every day. All right, nothing fancy, nothing high tech. All right, and then you go look at the bottom right here under RIT packs. You see it's listed under equipment. If you request a RIT pack alone, it is considered equipment, and that is fine. Okay. However, if you request a RIT pack along with an SCBA, it will get rejected. All right. An SCBA is a PPE request, not an equipment request. If you need a RIT pack with an SCBA, you need to add the RIT pack as an additional funding item within the PPE activity for SCBAs. Right? All right. So here's a screenshot that I took of the ops and safety application. And it's going to ask you about the equipment training that I talked about earlier. It's weighted. Okay. If you are not trained in the use of the equipment that you're requesting, you will not get awarded. For each piece of equipment that you request, you will be asked a series of, three questions. Okay. All right. The first question is your department trained in the proper use of equipment being requested? And if you are, just answer yes, and we do believe you. Okay. The second question is, are you requesting funding to train your department on the use of the equipment that you're requesting because you are not currently trained to use it? You will want to answer or use the answer yes to complete this question. Okay. For question number two. If this is the case, you will want to add the cost associated with the training as a new line item under additional funding. If you're not already trained to, question number three, if you're not already trained to use the equipment and you're not requesting funding to get the training, you must answer yes that you are going to get the training through another source. All right. And just a note for this question, for the training question, you must answer yes to at least one of these questions. If you don't, you will get a low score and it could subsequently lower the score for the rest of your application. So please make sure you choose yes for one of these questions. All right, so make sure you are determining to make sure when you are determining what you're asking for, that you can explain how receiving that item that you're requesting is going to have a direct effect on your firefighters' health and safety. It's very important for us that firefighter health and safety is always looked at. It's a high. All right. And in the narratives, we want to know that the funding we're providing will benefit your health and safety. All right. Age is an important part of the scoring process. All right. Older is always better when you're considering what to ask for. If you're replacing equipment, make sure you include the date of the manufacturer and not the date when it was purchased. It's sometimes, and most of the time, it's overlooked because sometimes individuals look at the purchase receipts or the receipts that they use to purchase the item, and they'll use that date, but you want to look at the manufacturer's date. It might get you an additional year or a few more months, but it'll get you some more time. All right. Also, you want to make sure and articulate that the equipment that you're purchasing will benefit other organizations, such as your mutual aid partners. And finally, you want to make sure that this equipment that you're purchasing will bring you up to compliance with the national standards, such as OSHA or NFPA. It's very important that we see that. And you are going to be asked that question in the application. All right, just real quick, I want to bring up and talk about the product life cycles. I keep repeating age and I keep repeating, saying that the older is better, right? And in this slide, you will see the useful life cycle associated with these age categories. And I'll give you an example. Cardiac monitors, okay? Cardiac monitors have a life cycle up to 7 years old, up to 7 years. Just because you have a cardiac monitor that is 6 years old, all right, doesn't mean you should put it in to replace it at that point. There's a strong chance you're going to compete with another department that has the same monitor that is significantly older. All right, so please make sure you keep an eye on this page right here when you're reviewing applications to see the average life cycle or the useful life cycle of your item that you're requesting. All right, so after you identify what items you need, you will be asked a follow-up question regarding its purpose. And I talked about this earlier, that this question here is also weighted. It's also part of that swim lane in the weight. The answer to the follow-up purpose question will make or break your application. All right. Again, same thing. This year, I've seen a bunch of departments put in for an application and they put in for a high priority item. But then when it came time to purpose questions, they put in a medium low priority purpose question, and that negated their application. All right. So when you choose the item you are requesting, you will be asked the purpose for why you're requesting the item. All right. So my advice here is any high priority items that you're requesting has to coincide with the high priority purpose answer you choose. All right. For example, if you are requesting equipment that you do not currently own or it's damaged beyond repair, you should use that first high priority bullet point, which says it right here, it says obtain equipment needed but not currently owned or replace equipment that is broken or damaged beyond repair to achieve the minimum operational and deployment standards for existing missions. Okay. If you are requesting to replace equipment that is just no longer compliant, you want to use a second option over here where it says replace non-compliant equipment to current standards. The last two bullet points, I'm sure you know at this point, please do not choose it. If you choose it, your application will get rejected. Right. So we'll go on to the next part, which is the PPE. All right, just like the scoring factor that I talked about for equipment or with equipment, the process works the same way for PPE. The more points you get, the higher your score will be, and there will be a score leader. Okay, you're gonna have to try to match that score leader's point at 70%, I think is the goal. Okay, in this case with PPE, these points includes factors such as the priority of the items you are requesting, that's weighted, the purpose for the request, it's a weighted question, and the age of PPE being replaced. Um, for SCBA, if you are NFPA 1981 compliant, and if you are trained to use the PPE, and finally call volume. All of these are weighted, so make sure you put the correct item in here. All right, so a good rule for of thumb for PPE is, again, the older the better, right? This means when you're conducting that little risk assessment I talked about earlier, you'll want to seek out the PPE that is at minimum 10 years old or older. If you put anything below 10 years, we're not going to consider that. It will not pass scoring criteria. All right. For SCBA, right, it must also be 10 years old or older, but also be 2 cycles out of compliance with the NFPA 1981. And for the FY25 application to be considered a high priority for a replacement, your SCBA must either meet the 2013 edition of NFPA 1981 or be older than that. Again, in order to be competitive, you got to remember it, the older, the better. All right, so here's another shot or screenshot taken from the NOFO. All right, so take a look at all the high priority items. You have your boots, you have your gloves, your goggles, right? And now take a look at the medium priority items, your specialized equipment. You have your ballistic PPE, your chem and bio suits, extrication clothes. Just remember, just don't forget that that the high priority items are going to get you the most amount of points. But you know when you're choosing what you want, just make sure you stick with this section over here. Okay, it's easily you could easily overlook it. All right, so earlier I discussed the do's and don'ts for equipment purpose questions. All right, and I will discuss the PPE purpose questions. All right, and this is very important because I know some of you have bunker gear that's getting close to that 10-year mark. All right, so if you're requesting turnout gear for firefighters that do not have it, or if you have riding positions on your apparatus that do not have an SCBA assigned to them, you want to use the first high priority answer right here, which is to increase supply for new or existing firefighters, new hire and existing firefighters. Okay. If you are requesting SCBAs or turnout gear that is damaged or it's unusable or unrepairable, but it's still in service, you will want to use the second high priority answer, which is to replace in service, in use, damaged, unsafe, unrepairable PPE. Okay. And finally, if you're simply just replacing your SCBA or turnout gear to meet the current standards, you will want to use the final high priority answer, which is to replace in service, in use, expired, non-compliant PPE. And I want to give you a heads up, choosing the item or choosing the answer that's correct for your specific situation. So let's just say, for example, if your turnout gear is damaged or it's unsafe, choosing this will prompt a follow-up question specifically for the length of how old your turnout gear is. If you're going to choose this first answer to increase supply for new hires or existing firefighters, we're not going to ask you how old is your supply or how old is your gear, simply because you just don't have it for that firefighter. So you want to make sure you choose the correct answer. Even though it's a high priority answer, you want to choose the correct high priority answer because it's going to prompt you for an additional question afterwards. Okay. I just want to give you a heads up. In your application, you'll need to list all your PPE and how old each item is. And remember, I talked about earlier in the last slide. Okay. If you choose this specific question or this answer, it's going to open up that portion of the application where it's going to ask you how old each item is. Call volume is used as a tiebreaker when the PPE application, excuse me, when PPE applications are scored. All right. The program also wants to make sure every firefighter or riding positions that needs an SCBA has gear that meets that standards. All right. Um, so as discussed with the equipment sections, right, there will also be training questions um, that's going to be asked about, right? They're going to ask you, are you trained to use this equipment? You want to click on yes. All right. The program will not award equipment that you are not trained on to use. So it's critical that you answer to one of these questions to be yes, that you are trained on this. Okay. And if you haven't trained on it, right, we want to know that if you will be training on it. So if you haven't trained on it yet, we're going to want to know if you are going to be trained on it. All right. All right. So we're going to go into wellness and fitness. All right. So wellness and fitness has two priority levels. If you want to go after priority two, you got to prove your department already has or is planning to set up the five programs shown here, right here. Okay, the periodic health screenings, entry to physical examinations, immunizations, behavioral health programs, cancer screenings. All right. If you're missing any of these, you won't qualify for the extra step for those extra items in the priority two. All right. So once you've shown you've got priority one wellness and fitness programs, or you're asking for money to start them, you can go after priority two items. Priority two items covers pretty much anything else you'd use for wellness and fitness. All right. And just remember, priority two items are only meeting priorities for this year specifically. So please make sure you review the NOFO to see that. All right. Modification to facilities. So for your modifications to facilities, you got your direct source, excuse me, you have your direct source capture exhaust systems, your sprinkler systems, or smoke and fire alarm systems that can be retrofitted into your station. Okay. Um, the highest priority will be given to applicants requesting a first-time installation of a new source capture exhaust system. All right. And in order for your request to be the highest priority, right, we'll give the highest priority to stations that have sleeping quarters or be occupied 24/7. Okay. There are three high priority items under this activity. All right. And I talked to you about it earlier. Your direct source capture exhaust systems, sprinkler systems, and fire and alarm systems. Okay. Although the replacement of source capture diesel systems is allowable, the highest priority will be given to applicants requesting first-time installations of a system. Also, the maximum allowed amount for each system is $100,000 this year. All right. And finally, the last option safety item you could choose for is training. All right. Training. The one thing we do love here is training. Okay. If you know anything about FEMA, FEMA loves its training. Training is expensive and it's tough to coordinate, but we're going to pay for it. Take a look at the NOFO and see if there's training in there that you want to send your staff to or you want to conduct. I know you have your firefighter one, firefighter two, and for New York State, you got your BFEL, HEMPRO classes, fire officer one, two, three, FAST, BLS, ALS, EVOC. FEMA will pay for it if you get awarded. And just a note, in order for your training to be the highest priority, it must be led by an instructor that is certified to provide that training. All right, I talked about it earlier, micro grants. It is a pretty neat option and it's very popular. And micro grants are an option under your ops and safety application. So in your application, there's going to be a section there, a little tab. It's going to ask you, are you applying for a micro grant? And if you are, you click on yes. Okay. A micro grant is essentially any request that is less than $75,000 and can be for any one of the five listed items I talked about earlier. Okay. And just to note, your micro grants are an option. If you apply for a micro grant under any of these activities, it then becomes your ops and safety application. All right. Um, give you an example. You cannot apply for a micro grant PPE washer that's less than $75,000 and do a second application to request SCBAs. It has to be either or. A micro grant is intended to help applicants that have been or had not been successful in the past, right? For each micro grant application, the system will look back over the past 5 years to determine if the applicant has been successful or not. If you have not been successful, the applicant may receive up to 3 additional points towards your pre-score, and depending on how many times they've applied as well, and if they have not received an award. All right, and it's very important to know that a micro grant only competes with other micro grants. So a micro grant will not compete against a regular ops and safety application. It's only going to compete against its own application for a micro grant. All right, so we're going to go into vehicle acquisitions. All right, so for vehicles, a lot of people are interested in vehicles, and vehicles is a very popular application to put in for. All right, I mean, I know I would be, right? If I could get it free through AFG, why not apply for it, right? And you could do so, you could apply for it. Well, the issue is that there are so many people that's applying for it, or so many people that is interested in the application. However, AFG gives out so few each year, which makes this specific application very competitive. I think the turn down rate from last year or the year before that, I think it was about 85%. So it's pretty high. Vehicle acquisition is a high priority item and is meant to replace unsafe vehicles. Okay. If the vehicle you're trying to replace has an open cab or a jump seat, all right, and there's a few out there I've seen, or it's built prior to 1992, or it's unsafe, you got a good chance. If the vehicle you're replacing is just 15 years old, good luck. You know, the vehicle program is super competitive and the turn down rate is very high, but it doesn't hurt to apply. It's a free application. Apply. You just never know what your chances are. All right. So you can submit the ops and safety application, you can submit your regional application, and you can submit your vehicle application and just see how it goes. And for regional applications. All right. So I mentioned regional applications in the last few slides. All right. And this is your chance where you could get together with your mutual aid partners and put in and you decide to put in for a common item that you need. Mutual aid is a very, very important, topic, right? It's a very important and it's a big sticking point for FEMA. Regional grants are attractive to us because it allows us to serve more communities, more firefighters, and more fire departments. A regional request is a good opportunity where you can combine the application with one or more other agencies or other departments to request a common need, right? So you could get together with your surrounding departments and you could brainstorm, network. You could ask for, hey, if you all have a common need, such as radios, okay, portable radios. Portable radios are a high priority item this year. If your radios are out of date and you want to get new radios, you can go in on a regional application with the mutual aid partners and apply. All right. Two or more departments can also request to replace an apparatus or get a new one. However, that apparatus has to benefit all the departments that are involved in this application. All right. And just because you submitted a regional application or regional request doesn't mean you can't submit an ops and safety request. You can submit both applications. Okay. You could submit a regional request for portable radios. However, you can't submit an ops and safety application for the same thing. Um, we will not allow you to apply for the same item in both regional and your option safety application. You have to do something different. All right. All right. So I just discussed in the last few slides all the applications that are available, right? Your regional, your vehicle, and your option safety application. Now I'm going to talk about your narratives, and this is very, very important. So there are five narrative boxes, and I'm going to talk about each box one by one. Okay. But before you start typing up a narrative, I want to give you some general tips and advice. All right. The advice on this slide applies to all the narrative boxes, not just this one, to all of them. And I've seen a lot of good applications get rejected at peer reviews because the narratives were not tailored to their departments or their communities. They gave a lot of general specific information about the products they're using, but not tailoring it to how their department uses it, right? We want to know what is unique about you and the people that you serve. So really focus in on yourselves, your own department. For example, if you're asking for a thermal imaging camera or a portable radio, you want to discuss why you need it and how your department uses it to support your community and your fire grant operations, as opposed to how those items are used in the national standards. Okay, you don't want to copy and paste what the manufacturer wrote as how this item's going to be used. We want to see how you use it. Okay, you want to be able to stand out the best, and the best way to do it is to describe yourself. What makes your department unique? So again, I've seen many departments fail at this. All right. All right. So the reason why I say that say this is, and do you remember that peer review panels I mentioned earlier? Okay. Those individuals are made up of your fellow fire service members. Okay. You want to make yourself relatable to a first responder. You want to talk shop. You want to use lingo like a first responder or a firefighter because that's who your audience is. You know, every firefighter knows the general standards or the national standards of how to operate a portable radio or why you need to operate a portable radio. But we want to know as a firefighter how you use that portable radio for your department. All right. And don't forget, it's very important. You are expressing yourself as a first responder in need. Always show that you are in need. Okay. When you develop your narrative, you want to ask a friend, or even better yet, ask another first responder or another firefighter to proofread the final product. And when I say proofread, I'm not saying check for grammar or punctuation, which is actually pretty important, right? But is not as important as expressing yourself as a first responder. So we want to see that. Also, quick note, we don't so don't use brand names. We, for some reason, FEMA does not like using brand names. So try to stick with the type of unit or type of equipment, not the manufacturer that makes it. And also, for each narrative, there's going to be about 4,000 characters that you could type in there. So there's a limit to it. The best approach that I've seen so far is using Microsoft Word, typing all your information in Microsoft Word, saving it, checking, obviously check for punctuation and grammar on MS Word, and just do a quick count on it. So if you're over 4,000 characters, you may want to reduce it. If you're at 4,000 characters, it's fine. So just copy and paste it onto the narratives. All right, super helpful and really, really valuable. Um, are the narrative development self-help resources. Okay, and I'm going to email this to you guys too. The self-evaluation sheets, we'll start off with this one. The self-evaluation sheets will be used during the peer review panels. Okay. So during the panels, the AFG staff, and I've been to the panels last year and the year before, and this is what we do. So the AFG staff gives a little brief, a little pep talk to the reviewers, to the other firefighters, and how to go about in reviewing the narratives. All right. We're going to say, hey, take a look at this sheet, this self-evaluation sheet. And because these are some of the things that to look for when reviewing the narrative, right? So the reviewers are going to utilize this sheet to give the exact criteria, or excuse me, they're going to utilize this sheet to review your application and narratives. Okay. The great resource is the narrative development toolkit. Okay. The toolkit essentially uses the self-evaluation sheets to give you additional tips and tricks on how you can meet the criteria listed in the self-evaluation sheets. It's also going to provide you with the best practices when developing your narrative and sample narrative, and it's going to give you sample narratives, to, essentially to give you a feel for it, how your narrative should flow. Also, again, I'm going to provide these resources to you today or tomorrow after the presentation. All right, so for the narratives, there are five narrative boxes. Okay, there are five narratives that you're going to have to write up. And then as you can see, four of the narratives are graded and scored, and one is not going to be scored. The very first narrative, all right, which is the description of organization and or community serve. This is not scored. However, don't be fooled, all right? Even though it's not scored, it is the most, I think it's the most important narrative, okay? Again, I've been to panels last year. It's a very important narrative. What you're doing is basically giving a good description, a really description of the community, of your community, and a description of your agency. This is all about you. I talked about this in the first slide, in a few slides. This is the first narrative box that the peer reviewer sees. They're going to learn everything there is to know about your department and the communities that you serve. They're going to learn about what makes you unique. And that is why it is the most important box. You want to be able to captivate your audience, captivate the other firefighters. You want to capture their attention right off the bat, right in the beginning. You want them to care about the remaining four narratives, right? If you do not capture their attention here, chances are they may lose interest for the remaining narratives. You got to remember these other peer reviewers, these firefighters are reviewing hundreds of applications, right? So you got to figure out what makes your application unique and stand out the most to them. And think of it like this. Think of it as if you want to get into a new TV show, a new TV series, right? You want most of the time, if that first episode doesn't catch your attention, you're not going to watch the remaining series, right? You're just going to like go on to the next series or go on to the watching Sons of Anarchy or Band of Brothers, right? So you want to capture their attention right off the bat. So this narrative, the community and agency description narrative, will convince the peer reviewers or the panelists to have an interest for the remaining narratives. All right, and the next narrative, which is the project description and budget. So I talked at the beginning or at the middle of this presentation, I talked about a risk assessment. Okay, this narrative is where you want to jot that risk assessment down, or that the risk assessment that you completed, and this is going to score you a lot of points. All right, and with this narrative, you do not really need to get creative. All right, there are four steps that I want you to follow. Okay, so step one, identify your problem. All right, step two, what is your solution to that problem? All right, step three, how much will it cost? And step four, how long will it take to complete the project? And this is where you're going to add the risk assessment. So the project description should say or sound something like this. We did a risk assessment and we found the following problems. All right, these items, these portable radios that we have in our inventory are super old and don't work anymore. And the solution to that problem is to use AFG funding to purchase this piece of equipment, and that this equipment will better help protect our firefighters and our communities. It will cost this amount of money, and it will get done within 2 years of the pay to performance. And the reason why I say 2 years is because right off the bat, when you get awarded, you are given 2 years to complete your application to complete the award. So that's why I say you're going to get it done within 2 years. It's going to show that you have an interest in getting things done quickly. All right, financial need. In the financial need narrative, this is essentially where you are going to convince the panelists that there is absolutely no way that you can complete this project on your own without asking for federal funds. All right. I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. You're going to have to seem like you're desperate for federal funds, even if you don't want to. Okay. Also, we're going to want to see the efforts that you made to make money, whether it's through fundraising. Have you done fundraising? Have you gone door to door asking for donations? Have you done a boot drive? Okay. What efforts did you do to try to complete this project on your own? That is what we want to know. Okay. And it's very super important. Make sure you put together a breakdown of your internal department's budget, how much you have going in and how much you have going out. It's very important. They want to see that. They want to see if you have any capital projects eating away at your budget. We want to know about it, right? If you have that 30-year-old or 35-year-old engine that keeps breaking down and you need to keep pumping money to get it repaired, that's something you want to put down, right? It's killing your budget. You can't afford it because this 30-year-old ladder is just keeps breaking down. So you got to say what you're spending your budget money on, and this is why you cannot afford to complete the project by yourself, and that is why you need to apply for an AHG fund. So with your cost benefit narrative, this is your opportunity to show the benefits of the project as it relates to the cost. All right. We want to know how far you can stretch that dollar we're going to give you. And this is the part of the narrative. Um, this part of the narrative is very, very project driven. All right. And as many of the benefits will be determined by exactly what it is that you're purchasing and the impact that is has on your department. All right. So this is where you want to talk about how that small amount of money that FEMA is going to give me is going to help this many people in our community and how we're going to keep this many firefighters safe. You want to show how far you can stretch that dollar. Okay. Because I said it earlier. Some things to consider in this narrative, in the cost benefit narrative, are the benefits to firefighters or public safety, the decrease in property loss or the decrease of loss of life, the frequency of use, how many times we're going to use it, the decreased overhead and administrative budgets and cost, the insurance issues or the decrease in insurance or the decrease in maintenance costs. Okay. Also, this is where you want to include any mutual aid benefits. If you give us this equipment, we will be able to help out three or five other communities in our neighboring jurisdictions. Okay. And not only is our community and our firefighters going to benefit and help out, we're going to be able to provide in this other assistance to another community, which you are providing mutual aid to, which has a huge population in addition to ours. All right, and the last narrative is the statement of effect narrative. Essentially, this is just a conclusion. You're going to take the main points from the first four boxes and you're going to compile them, put them together in a summary, and you're going to talk about how this AFG award will help your community and the firefighters. Okay. Just like the cost benefit analysis, the statements of effect is very project driven. All right. You're taking the projects that you're using from that cost benefit narrative and putting in this narrative as well. Okay. In this section, you'll want to show the benefits of the project as it relates to your daily operations. All right, I talked about it earlier. Getting portable radios, we want to see how that portable radio is used during a daily operation, during your SOPs. We want to see how it's going to benefit it. You want to describe how the project will improve your operations or make your department more viable and effective. All right. You want to discuss any reductions in risk to firefighters or the public. You'll want to thoroughly explain how often the equipment will be used and when you receive it. You'll also want to talk about the impacts that the project may have on firefighter or public safety or property conservation. All right. All right. So we're at the home stretch. You completed the purpose questions, you you completed the narratives, and you're ready to hit the submit button. All right. But before you do, all right, and I talked about it earlier, I recommend you take a look before you submit it, just make sure you take a look at those documents and resources that I mentioned, right? Your self-evaluation sheets and the narrative toolkits. Make sure you take a look at these, okay? Also, if for some reason I cannot send it to you, um, on this slide, it will give you the link to where you can find all that documentation. All right. All right. There's also that monthly AFG newsletter. Again, please sign up on it if you haven't done so. It's going to give you some great general AFG updates. And also, I'm always here if you need me. And if for some reason you cannot get to me, I may be on a call, or I may have a meeting, or I'm probably doing another workshop or presentation. Please email that fire grants email right there, and also please reach out to the fire grants help desk at 866-274-0960. They are available. Uh, and this concludes the AFG Development Workshop. And thank you everyone for joining me today. So I'm going to just, I guess, leave it up to questions and answers.
Yes, sir. Alvin, thank you. We